Did you know that there are 7 companies involved in closing your mortgage transaction? I'm going to explain who they are, what they do, and how they affect your closing costs in this video. Hey guys, Oleg Tkach here, and one question that we get asked all the time is, what is it going to cost for me to get the loan? And what a lot of lenders do out there is they only share what their costs are and they fail to disclose everybody else that's involved in the transaction. So what I want to do today is I want to share with you all 7 companies that are involved and what makes up a buyer's closing cost. The first part to closing costs, very simply, is us, the lender. Now, what is included in that? Very simply, underwriting and processing fees, different tax certifications that we need to do, the credit report, and different verifications. The second company involved is the appraiser. And what the appraiser does is they go out to the property, they look around, make sure there's no safety or health concerns, make sure that it's in livable condition, and then they go out and they look in the neighborhood and outside neighborhoods to see what other homes have sold in the last 3 to 6 months. Then they take all that data and determine fair market value. The third company is the escrow company. What the escrow company is, they're a neutral third party that is not necessarily representing anybody. What their job is very simply to receive our loan documents, sign the seller, sign the buyer, and receive the closing funds from the buyer, and then properly distribute all the funds so that way your loan could move to closing. Now, the fourth company involved is the title company. And what the title company's primary job is to make sure that there's no liens that are going to transfer from the seller to the buyer. Now, in addition to that, they also make sure that the person that's selling the home has the right to sell the home, and they also check the buyer to make sure there's no judgments or anything that's going to possibly pop up on their record that then is going to be tied to the property, essentially protecting the lender. So the title company's job ultimately is to protect everybody involved and make sure that nothing gets transferred over and nothing weird is going on with the property. The fifth company involved is the county, and pretty much what they do is they record the transaction from the seller to the buyer, and it's all public county records as far as who bought it from who and what they paid for it. The sixth company that's involved is the insurance company. Now, you as the buyer get to choose who your insurance agent is and what coverages they provide. And essentially what the insurance company does is it provides coverage for the home just in case anything happens after closing. The seventh part of closing costs is the property taxes, which are determined by the county depending on the home size, the lot size, the home value, and so on. Now, property taxes are prepaid in advance anywhere between 2 to 8 months depending on the closing date and when the first payment date is going to be. So those are the 7 items that make up the buyer's closing costs. Now, how much does it equate to at the end of the day? Well, that really depends. The general rule of thumb is if you're buying a home over $400,000, the closing costs are roughly around 2.25%. If you're buying a home under $400,000, they're roughly 3% to cover everything. Now let me share with you the 3 different ways that a buyer's closing costs can be paid for. The first way to pay them is to ask the seller to cover them. And the way that works very simply is, let's say you're making an offer for $300,000. You ask them to pay for 3%, which means that they're going to cover $9,000. So ultimately, as a seller, they net $291,000 if they accept your offer. Now, let's say they come back and say, no, we don't want to accept that. We need $300,000, and that's the bare minimum. Then at that point, what a lot of our clients do is they raise the price up 3%, so in our example, $309,000. So then the seller pays their closing costs and still nets their $300,000. Another way to pay for the closing costs is to ask the lender to cover them. Now, they could cover either part of them, most of them, or all of them. However, anytime a lender pays for anything for you, they're going to raise up the interest rate. So if you want to get the best rate on the market for your given situation at that time, asking the lender to cover the closing costs will definitely not achieve that. Typically, rates will go up by 1/4 to 1/2 to 1% higher depending on how much money you want the lender to cover towards closing costs. So this is exactly what's happening when you see advertisements for zero closing costs if you work with a certain lender or a certain bank and so forth. Essentially what they're doing is paying for it, but in turn raising your rate. And a lot of companies will not disclose this and won't tell their buyers this, and they use this as a way to promote themselves. Now the third way to pay for the closing cost is, well, very simply, pay them yourself. And pretty much what that looks like is you bring in your down payment, your closing costs, and those two figures combined are what your funds due at closing are. I hope this provides you with some clarity on the home buying process, who's involved, and what makes up your closing cost. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If any questions come up whatsoever, feel free to contact me and my team. Otherwise, don't forget to subscribe below for future videos, and we'll see you next time.